According to the Political Action Committee Emily's List, more than 30,000 women have signed up to run for office this year. Among them, Krish Vignarajah. She's in a crowded field of Democrats looking to unseat incumbent Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland. Among other things, Vignarajah is also proposing a new agency. It's focused on stopping sexual harassment and requiring anyone seeking public office, employment, or funding to disclose whether they've committed such acts. Krish Vignarajah joins me now. Krish, I want to ask you, when you want to take this Me Too conversation to the next level, you want to take action, and you want to start this office specializing in stopping sexual harassment, how would you do that? What would it look like?
Sure. I mean, I think that right now what we need to put in place are the safeguards so that we're not having this conversation in 10 or 20 years. And so what I proposed was the first of its kind Office of Sexual Harassment and Violence in order to have a number of different important charges. One is to make sure that we are incentivizing independent audits of government and business workplaces. Another is to make sure that we're certifying gold standard employers so that a number of employers will step up to make sure that this kind of conduct, that there is zero tolerance for it. But also making sure that the office would provide wraparound services for survivors so they feel empowered and protected as they come forth with their own tales. But then also that we make sure we put the resources we need to address this problem, whether it is harassment, whether it is sexual violence, including one of the things I proposed was putting resources to address the backlog of rape kits.
You talk about this, and people always worry about funding these type of initiatives. Where would the money come from, and how would Maryland pay for this?
Sure. I mean, this is where, how can we not pay for it? In the sense that we obviously have allocations for public safety already. We also want to make sure that we're incentivizing workplaces where women can stay retained in their environments. And I think, frankly, it's one of those things where part of it will be borne by the government, but part of it also is going to be making sure that employers step up, because they are, of course, half the problem, which means that they are also half of the solution.
You're, in my understanding, the only woman running in the Maryland governor's race. It's a state where registered Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1. Yet you have a Republican governor who has a great deal of money in his campaign war chest. If you win the June primary, how would you break past that?
Sure. I mean, for me, it is very much going to be about giving people a reason to show up at the polls. The reason why we have a Republican governor in, as you noted, a 2-1 Democratic state is because nearly 300,000 Democrats didn't show up in 2014. And the majority of them were women, minorities, immigrants, and younger voters 18 to 29. And time again, whether it is Virginia or even more recently in Alabama, we know what happens when people actually turn out to the polls. Democrats win. And so for me, it's very much about addressing the fact that for the first time in my lifetime, out of 14 federal and statewide offices, so that's 8 congressmen, 2 senators, the attorney general, comptroller, lieutenant governor, and governor in Maryland, all 14 of those positions are filled by men. And so as I am running against 6 men as the only female candidate in the field, there is an enthusiasm, frankly, a starvation for women's leadership, particularly in politics, and that's what I'm tapping into.
You talked about immigrants. You came to this country as a child, an immigrant. How did that influence your decision to run?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you that, I realized that my story could have taken place in no other country in the world. We fled a civil war when I was 9 months old. My parents came to America with no jobs, $200 in their pockets, and 2 very young kids in their arms. And in no other place in the world could I have gone from Woodlawn High School, which most people would only know because of the Serial podcast, but in no other place in this world could I have gone from Woodlawn High to the White House, except in America. But what I worry about, and I have a 7-month-old baby, I worry about whether, her and her generation, whether they have the same opportunities as my family did. I worry about, whether if we had fled today instead of in 1980, would we have had a chance to come to Trump's America? And I'm not sure that we would have. And yet in a state as diverse as Maryland, where we have the fastest growing foreign-born population in the country, we have a governor who has failed to speak out for Marylanders when many of these issues have been brought into the forefront because of the xenophobia, of the anti-immigration rhetoric coming out of this White House. And so I want to make sure we change that.
There have also been questions about your own eligibility to run based on where you were registered. You asked for a court to decide. When can we expect that decision?
Sure. I mean, I think it will be coming in very short order. We know that the law is on our side, which is why I didn't like the mudslinging that happened immediately after we announced. I realized our candidacy was threatening to many, and so I wanted to put an end to this with an affirmative judgment. And there is no question that I will be on the ballot in June as well as in November.
Krish Vignarajah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Rena, for having me.